Hello and welcome. Wherever in the world you are watching this weekly reflection and worship time from, I welcome you. You are joining the folks from Christophen Old and New Parish Church on the western side of Edinburgh. Can I invite you to listen to the reading today? We have two readings, one about Moses and one about the Apostle Paul. Our first reading is taken from Exodus chapter 3. One day while Moses was taking care of the sheep and goats of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, he led the flock across the desert and came to Sinai, the holy mountain. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him as a flame coming from the middle of a bush. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but that it was not burning up. This is strange, he thought. Why isn't the bush burning up? I will go closer and see. When the Lord saw that Moses was coming closer, he called to him from the middle of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." He answered, "Yes, here I am." God said, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals because you are standing on holy ground." And reading from verse 13. But Moses replied, "When I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your ancestors sent me to you,' they will ask me, 'What is his name?' So what can I tell them?" God said, "I am who I am." You must tell them, 'The one who is called I Am has sent me to you.'" Our second scripture reading is taken from the book of Acts, reading from chapter 17. Paul stood up in front of the city council and said, "I see that in every way you Athenians are very religious. For as I walked through your city and looked at the places where you worship, I found an altar on which it is written, 'To an unknown God.' That which you worship then, even though you do not know it, is what I now proclaim to you. God, who made the world and everything in it, is Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples made by human hands. Nor does he need anything that we can supply by working for him, since it is he himself who gives life and breath and everything else to everyone. From one human being he created all races of people and made them live throughout the whole world. He himself fixed beforehand the exact times and the limits of the places where they would live. He did this so that they would look for him and perhaps find him. And as they felt around for him, yet God is actually not far from any one of us. As someone has said, in him we live and move and exist. It is as some of your poets have said, we too are his children. Since we are God's children, we should not suppose that his nature is anything like an image of gold or silver or stone shaped by human art and skill. God has overlooked the times when people did not know him, but now he commands all of them everywhere to turn away from their evil ways. For he has fixed a day in which he will judge the whole world with justice by means of a man he has chosen. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising that man from death. You know the phrase breathtaking. Breathtaking, when something simply takes your breath away. And I don't mean it the way that the 1980s band Berlin sang about it in their hit single for the Hollywood American imperialist movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise, where the song "Take My Breath Away" relates to someone falling in love. Although, sure, that can be breathtaking. Rather, breathtaking would usually mean something that amazes you, something that can make you go, wow. And that was a feeling I had when I saw the fairly recent footage of the sperm whales assisting a mother whale who was giving birth. These whales acted as midwives, helping the mother during the labor by lifting the newborn calf to the surface for its first breath. As newborn sperm whales are initially what they call negatively buoyant. They would sink. And remember, whales need to take breaths of air, just like mammals typically do, as they are not fish that can breathe underwater. So these other midwives also helped to lift the tired mother. And amazingly, initially it was whales who were related to the mother, but later other unrelated male whales came in to support the mother and the calf to recover from birth. And it's the first scientifically documented case of these types of sea-living mammals assisting in the birth of a non-kin. And this indicates a complex social level of cooperation. It's worth watching if you can find the footage online. And it leaves me with a sense of awe at how amazing the world, the universe is, and we are but a part of it. Now, that is something that is breathtaking in a positive sense. And oftentimes I am left amazed at the wonder of so many of the intricacies of nature and of space and of physics. For instance, are you aware that if all the empty space within the atoms of a human body were removed, and only the subatomic particles, the protons, neutrons, and electrons, were pushed together, the resulting volume would be incredibly small, roughly the size of a speck of dust, a single red blood cell's size. Why? You might or might not wonder. Well, it's because the atoms are roughly 99.999999% just space. As the mostly solid space that is occupied by those subatomic elements is actually electron clouds. It's the space in between those subatomic particles that make up the volume of our bodies. And that's just wow. If you were as densely compacted as possible, it'll be the size of a grain of sand. And it seems that these subatomic particles essentially consist of energy. Protons, neutrons, electrons, in physics terms, essentially manifest as energy. According to modern physics, specifically Einstein's mass energy equivalence formula, E equals mc squared. Mass is simply a highly concentrated form of energy. And these are things in the measurable, quantifiable multiverse that sometimes take my breath away. But this too leaves me with a sense of awe at how amazing the world, the universe is, and we are but a part of it, a very small part of it. But then there's also another way that I find we lose our breath or we forget to breathe. I have a good friend who, like many people, suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. In her case, she suffers from complex PTSD. Essentially, she is almost always in a constant state of fight or flight. And one of the many means she's trying to cope with this debilitating challenge is to have a timer on her phone that goes off about half a dozen times a day. And what does the timer do? It simply reminds her to breathe. An alarm that reminds her to breathe deeper, slower than she would normally, because as the day wears on, she tends to breathe shallower and shallower, and her anxiety simply increases. So she needs to be mechanically reminded to stop and breathe again to help her to calm down her nervous system. Now, in her case, it seems somewhat extreme, and although many of us have been traumatized and may even suffer from a related disorder, the reality is that we are nowadays being bombarded by so many angst creating news flashes that cause us to get just more anxious. Bad news, that makes us start to fear more bad news, makes us think Britain is broken, make us think the world is going to hell in a handbasket, make us worry that another war is breaking out or another epidemic is brewing somewhere. And even within your own family or your circle of friends, you might increasingly be picking up on reasons to be worried, instead of enjoying one another's company or just their being who they are. So we might all, to a greater or a lesser extent, be stressing out. We might not all need a reminder to breathe, but many of us are breathing shallower and shallower, and we stress more and more. Not the best way to have our breath be taken away. And yet, it is the same glorious multiverse that we live in, where we stress out in, that all the wonder of life and endless galaxies are playing, that in turn are made up of these unimaginable small manifestations of energy. Angst and awe both held in tension. Wow and woe, both breathtaking. And it is in this tension that Moses has been mulling things over in his mind. Moses, Prince of Egypt fame, Moses, the legend that was the hope of the Hebrews, with his identity crisis and his criminal record as freedom fighter, who had to flee into the desert and ended up being a herder of sheep and goats. Yes, he did not know Einstein and space travel, so he would not have been in awe about physics or space exploration. And yes, Moses did not have a 24-hour online news cycle that made him be confronted with horrors all over the world 24/7. But he surely also would have been in awe when thunder struck the hills during a lightning storm somewhere out in the wilderness, or the Nubian ibex antelopes as they would scale seemingly vertical crags up into the mountains. And he probably also had a knowing sense of doom and angst, knowing how the people that he left behind as a refugee when he left Egypt, that they would be suffering in forced labor back in Egypt. Not necessarily knowing if his family would still be alive, and not knowing if he will ever be able to go back to see them back to his country of origin. So when he experiences this fabulous, fantastic interaction with the divine, you can sense that his sense of awe at the supernatural is grabbing his attention. It happens in the ordinary, the mundane, the everyday repetitive responsibility of tending the flocks of his uncle. The daily drudgery of earning a living, when he becomes aware that he's in the presence of God, in the presence of the divine. And he takes off his shoes because this place is holy. But you can also sense that his sense of knowing angst about his people's pain, their need for liberation, is what resonates with the will of God. His sense of stress about the well-being of those marginalized people that he knows. His sense for breathing shallower, for stressing about their destiny. And then, when he tries to wrap his head around this experience, this entity, this calling, this awareness, he wants to give it a name. So typical of us to try and put that which is beyond our understanding into a framework that we can get a handle on, giving it a name, being able to describe and maybe even predict or prescribe it. This entity, though, God refuses to give this breathless man a noun or a name that can limit God to a single characteristic or a geography or even a nationality or even a religion. because the name that God gives Moses is essentially untranslatable. We know it as I am who I am. It could also be translated as I am that I am. The core of the meaning is basically being. The ultimate state of being, the ease. That ease who is engaging with Moses. And then Moses does something interesting, something revolutionary. He confronts the gods of his time, the oppressive Pharaoh lineage, the god kings of his day, in the name of this God who is understood to be the ultimate ease, the ultimate literal being, the ultimate ease. And the end result is liberation, liberation from oppression, freedom for those who would trust this being to go out with Moses and go and be a people called to a greater state of being themselves, freed from oppression and slavery. This ultimate being is the one who hears the cries and the pleas of the people who are struggling in their daily toil to just survive. A being who feels compassion and who desires life to be opened up for those that are yearning to live. And about 10 centuries later, another great liberator of oppressed people steps up out into the public sphere in the midst of the then most clever philosophers of his day. Not in the culture of Egypt and its imperial hegemony like Moses did, but this time in the Greco-Roman world with its imperial systems of oppression under the brutally extractive Pax Romana and its vain distant gallery of Greek and Roman gods. The philosopher, the Apostle Paul, boldly relates God to his hearers when he quotes a poet who described God as the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Basically, the ultimate reality within and because of whom everything that is. So again, the great ease, the ultimate being. And Paul similarly shares that this being, the entity who is greater than our individual and our collective understanding or our existence, is in essence able to liberate us, able to overcome that which in his day was what was the greatest enemy of life, namely death. By referring to Jesus as the embodiment of the ultimate ease, who defeated death through being resurrected beyond death into a new, greater life. Despite being killed at the hands of the system, the very tool of this system of oppression, death, was defeated by life bursting through beyond death to a new, greater life beyond. Liberation from the anguish that death brings. No wonder the gospel spread like wildfire in the ancient Roman Empire, especially amongst the powerless, the nobodies, the marginalized, the oppressed, the slaves, the women, the social outcasts. Paul offered them the vision of an ultimate being within whom they were seen and by whom they were acknowledged and within whom their lives had meaning and hope and dignity. They were liberated from lives that would have felt worthless and hopeless, because the embodiment of the ultimate being had shared their fate and opened a new destiny and meaning to their own states of being. Which brings me back to you and me, and the things that make us breathless, both the things that make us anxious and the things that give us a sense of awe. So here we are, caught in this sacred, messy tension between our gasping anxieties and our breathless wonders. And we are people who often forget to breathe. Yet we are held by the one who is the very source of breath. If modern physics is right, then the stuff of our woe is made up of the same stardust energy as that which gives us a sense of wow. We are mostly empty space, yet as Paul reminded the Athenians, that space is not a vacuum. It is the very place where God enables us to live and move within God and God within us. As Christians, we believe that it is in Jesus where this abstract I am becomes very personal. In the man from Nazareth, we see the ultimate manifestation of being a person like you and me, who walks through the same anxiety-drenched world that we do. The one who took the terrifying empty space of human existence and filled it with a presence that permeates all with belonging and meaning and beauty. Jesus comes to us as the ultimate embodiment of this I am. The awesome God who steps directly into our anxious, fragmented lives. He doesn't wait for the woe to vanish before he reveals the wow. Instead, he inhabits the very tension that we feel. In Jesus, we see that the source of all energy, the one who holds our subatomic particles together, is a God of profound compassion who meets us in our shallow breathing and says, "Peace, do not fear. Relax and trust." He's a midwife of our existence, swimming beneath us when the news cycles and the traumas of the world make us heavy. He lifts us toward the light, reminding us that we are not just empty space, but a temple where the immortal, invisible God chooses to dwell. This awareness of God's presence everywhere changes how we walk through the world. And as we journey through life, we can symbolically take off our shoes, because everywhere is holy. All lives are holy. Like the ground Moses was standing on in the middle of nowhere when he realized it is holy ground. Why? Because the ultimate being was present, as God is present everywhere. This realization that we are all a kind of spiritual observer, someone who looks at the mundane flotsam and jetsam of daily life, but sees the thumbprints of the Creator. It's about realizing that the mystical isn't out there in some distant galaxy. It's right here in the things we pick up and put down every day. Like a child walking barefoot on the beach, amazed at the shells and the sea-washed pebbles glistening around her feet, in the bright sunshine of a new day. To help us settle into this posture of observation and awe, I want to lead us into a poem by George Mackay Brown called Beachcomber. Brown lived his life partially in Edinburgh, but mostly in Orkney. Orkney is a place where the material and the mystical that space seems a bit thin. And this poem illustrates somebody who is truly observant, someone who sees that every object, every day, and every breath is a vessel for a much larger story. So let us listen and look for the I am in the everyday. Now, the following beautiful rendition of the poem Beachcomber is by a Scottish minister friend of mine, Scott Burton.
Beachcomber by George Mackay Brown. Monday, I found a boot, rust and salt leather, I gave it back to the sea to dance in. Tuesday, a spar of timber worth 30 bob. Next winter it'll be a chair, a coffin, a bed. Wednesday, a half can of Swedish spirits. I tilted my head. The shore was cold with mermaids and angels. Thursday, I got nothing. Seaweed, a whalebone, wet feet and a loud cough. Friday, I held a seaman's skull, sand spilling from it, the way time is told on kirkyard stones. Saturday, a barrel of sodden oranges. A Spanish ship was wrecked last month at the Came. Sunday, for fear of the elders, I sit in my bum. What's heaven? A sea chest with 1,000 gold coins. Friend, whatever day it is today, have a good one.
Shall we pray? O God, you are the ultimate I am, beyond our wildest imaginings. And according to our faith, we believe that you desire for us to trust in you. But how can we if we cannot see you, if we cannot hear you? And yet when we look at the lilies of the field, we sense a beauty greater than we can create. When we see the sparrows in flight and hear their joyous songs, we sense that they are being cared for. And when we feel the nearness and friendship of those close to us, then we know that we are not alone. The community is a gift and creation and a blessing. So along with all of creation, we want to trust in your provision of daily bread. And along with the tired and lonely and weary, we want to trust in your care and protection today. Along with the confused and broken, we yearn for your guidance and healing today. And we acknowledge that although our lives are but a short breath, it is your breath within us that makes us alive. Amen.